Like, I think software is on an arc back where a lot of people care about owning the full stack. It doesn't sound appealing. The more powerful your AI agent becomes, that you have to continuously rent it. Like, that is more like a form of disenfranchisement.
What's up, everybody? I'm Titus, the VP of Go-to-Market at Civic, where we're focused on enabling secure agentic AI with authentication, orchestration, and automation at the core. On this show, we unpack what's happening in the AI space, from agent ecosystems, tooling, the security that keeps things running. Now, before we begin, as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on your favorite platform. Your support always makes a difference. Today, we're joined by David Minarsch, founding member of Olas and CEO of Valory. And then with David, we're going to be spending time talking about co-owned AI, decentralized agents, and where agentic systems are headed next. So let's get into it. David, tell the audience a bit about yourself, about what you're working on. Let's start from there.
Hey, thanks for having me on first. Where we at? So I'm David, founding member of Olas, and got a background in sort of economics, the PhD there, and then co-founded Valory, which is the core contributor behind Olas 21 summer. And since then, we've been contributing to Olas. So what is Olas? Olas has gone through a number of iterations, but today it basically wants to enable end consumers to take full ownership of the AI agent. So we see AI agent as this emerging technology, but also product category with many different like applications and verticals. And what our core belief is that there's a lot of users and humans who want to just outright own their AI agents, and that also that society benefits when that is the case, when we can take full ownership of our AI agents. So happy to dive into that in more detail.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to be talking about that. But before we dive into the product and the network, I do want to understand a bit more about your background, going from academia, game theory, then startup founder, and now like crypto and AI intersection. What's the through line between all of these? What keeps it interesting for you? How did you get to this point?
In a way, agents is the through line, because when I did in undergrads, I did maths and economics. I found both interesting, but what I found particularly interesting was sort of modeling systems with agents. And there's a field that applies itself to this game theory. So there you can consider sort of these actors in a game, which is a description of a circumstance, and you can think of them as agents. And then from there, did a PhD, as you mentioned, and realized that whilst I was doing my PhD, that in a sense, software is eating the world, right? And so I try to get more into using software, applying myself to writing code, and spend a lot of time after my PhD so working in more like tech. So did some machine learning stuff for some other startups, and then had my own startups at the time that always tried to marry emerging machine learning methods to problems that I came across. And through doing these other startups, I don't want to get into the details so we don't get lost there, but I was exposed to crypto once more. The first time I had heard about it was the Bitcoin white paper, and I had exposed myself like to the economics of it in 2013 a little bit. And then again in 2017, 18, around this hype back then, a lot of founders around me were building in the space. And so I took notice, and when my startup at the time failed, I realized I wanted to understand what is there that could overlap with what I'm already doing. I was obviously interested in continuing working on AI, which I saw as, creating more and more interesting applications. And I also was curious, like, how could you like use these coordination mechanisms from smart contracts and so on in this intersection? And at the time, like, those two fields were as far apart as they could be. And it almost like a lot of people you talk to would shake their head if you mentioned that there could be some sort of overlap. But there was this one startup at the time that had very lofty goals called Fetch.ai. They're still around. Very lofty goals of like building a ledger that is sort of also a substrate to run machine learning on, and building AI agents and all sorts of things. And that interested me, and I arrived there to work in 2019 and sort of got into agents. And it was interesting to me because it combines three areas that I had sort of built experience in, like this machine learning AI side of things, obviously the economics and game theory, and then this kind of overlap of those two with using blockchains and other kind of crypto tech to build new types of products, and that's where it all started.
That makes sense.
So in 2019, basically, I started building like AI agent a framework for the first time that has a wallet, right? And so that was quite ahead of its time and got a lot of head scratching.
I mean, there were no like reliable large language models yet in the market.
No,
there
there
was
weren't.
nothing to power those agents. Like everybody was kind of running their own show with deep learning models.
Correct.
It was...
I mean, also the term agent has been around a long time, right? Like, so it depends, like it's part of a lot of fields of research, but specifically multi-agent system research as a subfield of AI more broadly was around like for decades already then. But as you say, like the models were very specific. So like you would build a harness that would talk to like maybe like an NLP model over here, and then maybe like some, advanced statistical model over here to do something. So we did some, trading stuff back in the day. Like the research was mostly focused around applying this to optimizing like factories and things like that. So you could build agents, but like how capable an agent is and what an agent can do and so on, and how we think of an agent obviously has evolved a lot since then, like really a lot.
Yeah, so zooming back out into what you're doing today with Olas and Valory, can you kind of explain the mental model for the audience? How should they think about it? Once a foundation, once a contributor, what does the network look like? And what's kind of the engagement point with people that want to try it out?
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, back then software was eating the world. Now AI is eating software and hence the world. But basically, someone for most of the time had to create the software, and that was us. And now, interestingly, a lot of this is being done by AI. We're in the middle of that transformation. Can talk about it a little bit. But basically, the core contributor Valory built a lot of the smart contracts and a lot of the agent frameworks, agent-to-agent communication protocols and whatnot that all support the application suite that we offer. And so what is this today? Well, as a user of Olas, there's a couple of things you can do. The most basic thing is like obviously the token itself, which is just a ERC20. Then you have a application that's called Pearl. Pearl is our consumer-friendly application to own and self-custody an AI agent. You have different applications in there that are all different AI agents. So our most recent launch is Polystrat, which is your personal trader for Polymarket that works 24/7. Operates a consistent, mathematically sound trading strategy on markets that you select with intelligence that you select, i.e. models you select. So this is an example of our products. Pearl is that vessel we sometimes call the AI agent app store that sort of suits the consumer. And then on the other side, at the business side in a sense, but today really the agent side, you have this marketplace. That's effectively a set of smart contracts that are on-chain, plus a number of specifications that are on and off-chain that allow agents to, do micro trade with each other. And this has obviously now been quite standardized, or there's a lot of standardization happening. Like X42 comes to mind, A2A from Google, MCP, various other protocols that sort of weave into that intersection. But we've been doing this since 2023 with over 14 million microtransactions between agents to date. And it's really, here for a technical audience, it's really sort of the back end of Pearl in a sense. For the consumer of Pearl, it basically makes Pearl possible. So when you have this local agent that you run on your desktop, obviously that agent is constrained to like the resources on that device. And so via the marketplace, it can tap into, inference that can't be done locally, but it can also tap into data sources and other kind of services programmatically. So this idea that an agent just sort of does a micropayment and gets something back rather than maybe having to have an API key or something, that's sort of embedded there. So in total, we have these 3 products, the token, Pearl, and the marketplace.
Yeah, because I think that's one of the key things that people are almost like taking for granted now. Is like you just have an API key, you tap into this like central model that does everything. Whereas what you're saying is like, well, you can actually diversify your inference through these like more
fully
niche models.
And it goes beyond inference. Anything that you can imagine an API serves. Like the Web 2 way is to expose some sign-up thing for some human somewhere where they can download an API key after they gave in their credit card details or signed up for some other kind of enterprise plan, right? And then you put that API key into some piece of software somewhere, and then that piece of software can engage with that API on the terms offered. That's not new, and that actually works very well, but it means you have a human in the loop, and it's just not ready for the future that we're now having, where you have agents that want to just get stuff done and can actually get stuff done, right? And they can get stuff done without a human in the loop. So everyone has heard about OpenClaw and things like that. Have here like basically a level of intelligence where it can just say, okay, I want to use a certain API now, and the only thing blocking it now is if there's no way to access this API, if a human needs to pop up, right, and get that API key. And with micropayments and things like X42 and other standardizations like this, the idea is, okay, let's not have an API key at all. Instead, what we'll have is like the wallet that's on chain somewhere, anchored on any chain, really doesn't really matter so much. And then this agent can say, hey, like, I'm going to pay you on this chain, basically. And there's a sort of, protocol that navigates all this, and then the payment happens, and you as an agent get your service. So what do you unlock? It's like, basically, the more people or businesses or other agents that offer the services via such railways, right, like such rails, the more these agents are powerful, because they can just tap into this inference, this data, and so on. And then to your point, for a consumer, it not only has the benefit that this agent obviously that represents the consumer has access to these things, but also that like you're not tied to a single provider. So let's talk about inference, right? I'm a big fan of Cloud Code right now, but I also don't like the fact how I'm being like tied into this ecosystem, right? I would like to switch all the time. And so now there's alternatives I'm aware of that I can use. And they often make use of this sort of concept as well, where you have like some router in the middle, and with crypto rails, you can make that very efficient.
Yeah, and I think the other point is like, well, it's not just I'm not a fan of Cloud Code all the time, but like sometimes I find models that are good at one thing, others that are good at other things. So I want 2 models to give to their separate opinions on these tasks.
Yeah.
Like maybe I want my AI agent to get a second opinion rather than just go off of whatever OpenAI said or whatever Anthropic said.
I like this piece. So in 2023, when the large language models, I think, had their aha moment late 2022, if I'm not mistaken with the timeline now, where sort of ChatGPT sort of came to the scene for most people. And then in 2023, we built this like agent that we call Governator. It basically is built on our agent framework. And a cool thing about our agent framework is you can actually run an agent as a decentralized system itself. I don't want to spend too much time on this because there's a lot of products we built over the time, but this one particularly made use of this. So in governance, for instance, you can imagine on-chain governance, you don't want to necessarily rely on a single judge as to what the proposal says, whether it's thumbs up or thumbs down, and matches your preferences. So there we did exactly this. We'd have like an ensemble of different large language models that the different agents would poll, and then they would come to consensus on which aggregate choice they would take based on all the different votes from the different models.
Yeah, and I mean, we can definitely geek out about governance, multi-agent, like layerings. I think when the MOE methods appeared, I think that's where a lot of the models got a lot smarter on top of the thinking method that DeepSeek proposed. So between Mistral and DeepSeek, I think those were also pretty big leaps forward. And now we see those in ChatGPT, we see those in Claude and all the major models that are upgrading now. But I want to come back to one of the things that I introduced you with is this concept of co-owned AI, and what does that mean? How are you guys thinking about it? Why does it matter? Why should people care about that?
Yeah. So co-owned basically is like a term that spans everything from single ownership all the way to group owning a thing, right? And so that sort of encapsulates all the kind of modes that we want to support with Olas. But in all cases, it's this own in there, right? Like be it a single person owning their own AI agent that they run on their desktop with Perl, or be it a group of agents, maybe even a DAO, which we solved in a prior kind of cycle of Olas, where a DAO is a group of people, and then you would have them sort of co-own the agent. So we thought about this since 2021, and we built a stack that supports all these modes. So our agent framework, for the technical audience, you can deploy the agent as a single node that you run locally. And that's what happens when you are a Perl consumer. You have a single node, it's yours, that's just your agent configured to your needs. You control the keys, you control the software, that's it. But you can also deploy that same software as a multi-node system. So it starts looking a little bit like a blockchain and in the way in which it's deployed. Like there's different operators, they all run a node. And then only if these nodes run collectively under consensus rules, they sort of take an action. So the agent itself is sort of the collection of those nodes, and it works with, for the technical audience, a Byzantine fault tolerance. So you basically have this benefit that some agent nodes can be down and the agent still operates. But if too many are down, then the integrity is at risk, so it just stops operating. And that's a cool, obviously I would say that, but it's an interesting paradigm because it allows you to run an agent in a shared ownership model in a co-owned way. And so that's on the software level, two ways we think about co-ownership. And then I think since then, actually, there's been other dimensions of co-ownership that you see, like some of our competitors, or let's say other agent teams take in crypto specifically, which is where maybe the agent itself is just running on some server, but maybe the token associated with it is shared. So that would be a co-ownership model. Or maybe you have an agent running in a team where it's like a trusted execution environment where maybe you can make more assertions about that code is actually running, and again, you attach a token. So I'm sure the audience has heard about all these models. We really believe in the actual physical ownership. And I want to take a parallel. If you go back in time, my parents' generation when I was young and so on, the notion of owning a car was just logical. I mean, firstly, leasing and all these rent models were much less, and it was a piece of pride. And crucially, also the technology was different. So once you had the car off the manufacturer, right, there was no remote control. The manufacturer couldn't turn off the electronics and stop you from driving around. And that was a sense of true freedom. And I think one interesting issue which has crept in over the recent decades with how software has been procured and sort of used is we increasingly don't own things anymore. You might have an electric car or even a combustion engine car, but the basic can be turned off from afar, right? So are you actually owning the car even if you paid it off, or are you sort of renting some ownership rights, right, to the access rights to this car? And that's an interesting question. And I think we're already seeing how with OpenClaw and even this debate which Anthropic finds itself in with the Department of Defense in the US is an interesting issue of ownership in there, right? And I think software is on an arc back where a lot of people, not everyone and not for all use cases, but a lot of people care about owning the full stack. It doesn't sound appealing. The more powerful your AI agent becomes, that you have to continuously rent it. That is more like a form of disenfranchisement.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's one of those things where if it takes a lot of compute to run that particular model, then you end up in that situation because you don't have access to those GPU farms, and you have to have access to data centers that enable you to run billions and billions of parameter models at scale and efficiently, right? I think that's part of it. And that's why I think these networks make more sense, because if you co-own with others, then you can potentially also share the burden to run that particular model versus buying it from an independent third party that may end up dictating what you can do with it, which may or may not be to your liking, to your point.
Yeah. Ownership relates to control. There's an emotional component. transparency component. Usually, not always, but usually ownership means I can somehow take something apart and look into it, inspect it, audit it. I'm certainly also renting a lot of things. So I don't think like every modality of AI agent lends itself to this, but I think particularly around things where it's a lot about, private information or competitive information or assets. Like when I think about why are most people in crypto, it's about this element of self-custody and being able to control like when you want to move your funds on your terms. And that like actually also extends to your agent, like because an agent is only also useful if it has access to a wallet. And so the question then is if, we have ever smarter agent. Well, coding agent right now is all the rage, but more and more then you come into a territory where these agents need access to actual assets to buy stuff to get the final output to you that you actually care about. And so then the question is, okay, are you now effectively, taking out maybe also like a bank account on behalf of your agent or whatever we'll call it with, let's say, Anthropic or whoever, offers you that service, or can you just self-custody the whole thing? These are interesting dimensions of ownership. And then as you mentioned, like training a model or inferencing a model, how can we share that ownership?
Yeah, and like if you're doing some fine tuning that's really specific to the category you're trying to build for, then can you own that fine tune piece of it, not just give it away to whatever big model that you're doing it to? For sure. So I wanna go a couple of levels deep now and go more practical, because like I wanna show the audience like for them what this would look like. So if I go and download Pearl, right, and start running the Polystrat agent and start betting on some markets there, what is the agent doing from that moment on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you download it on either of the three big platforms, so Windows, Mac, or Linux, and then you set up a password to protect it locally. You then fund the application because all of our use cases right now have a financial asset component. So you have different ways of on-ramping into the product. If you're like crypto-minded, then there is actually the sort of secondary option, which is moving funds in straight from your crypto wallet, either on the target chain where the agent runs or from elsewhere. But most of our users actually just want the credit card route, and they just, type in that information via a third-party provider, get that all. And so they locally funding their agent, which I find is quite cool. So you can rock up with your credit card and have locally your agent funded. And then, yeah, you set it up. And like the way we think about agents before I get into the setup piece is really that they should be doing the stuff and you should just be setting the goals, right? And so that's also how all the products in Pearl work is like via chat, you can give, directions to the agent. And you can talk to it in natural language, in any language you want, because underlying it is a natural language, a large language model that obviously doesn't care. And you can then basically configure it via that. What's also interesting about that part is that you can talk to the agent at your level. I think like one thing that often UI approaches, like sort of traditional UIs have, where you maybe swap something or bridge something or whatever app it is you're using, is that you need to pick up the user where they are, and obviously you can only design one UI so far. Generative AIs are coming though, and that brings the challenge that you might just lose a user because they don't get the context. With chat, it's easier, right? Because like, as long as the user knows it's a trading agent, they can literally ask Polystrat, like their own instance of Polystrat, like, what are you? Like, how does it work, right? Like, you can just ask these questions and then it can configure it. We also have the nice way of you just hit start, like you don't even configure it because it has a default configuration. And then what the agent does, it works in the background for you. So the idea is not, I think there's a lot of products for Poly Market, you have like the one where you literally go yourself and fill out the choice you make and fund it, or maybe you have like a terminal in between, like a co-pilot approach where it gives you like some secondary information and then you make a choice. Here, the idea is you outsource it fully to the agent and you tell the agent just like, okay, I want these tools to be used. I have these kind of risk preferences and so on. I don't want to, trade more than, let's say, $1 or $5 or whatever for this given market or these types of markets. So it's like high level goals, and then the agent takes these instructions and translates them into outcomes for you. And so when you then run it, obviously it takes multiple days till you see like how it's doing, because like, you need time to pass for these markets to resolve. And so that's sort of a bit the experience. You can try it out right now at pearl.u, which is the website, and download it and give it a shot. One more thing there's that we really care about like user feedback. So if at any point in time you experience like something that you feel like could be better, there's a support button in the app itself, and you can reach us. So then you can like express your wishes.
So I'm curious. I mean, with these things, usually like you either had some alpha or like you have a point of view about the world, right? But like also, it's still a fuzzy instruction, right? It's not like very specific or deterministic. So like, what are some of the failure modes that you've seen? What kind of instructions the user give that agents like mishandle or misinterpret? Have you like kind of seen some of those happening with the agents?
Yeah. So very importantly, we don't like it's a very intentional architecture where the large language model never, for instance, constructs a transaction or touches the wallet directly. So what can happen is that obviously there does happen all the time is that these models have very different capabilities in terms of how they predict the future. Because ultimately this product, what you're doing is you're like kind of expressing a preference over like certain models in a sense as to how good they are at predicting the future, right? Because the agent then uses these models to predict the future and place the positions. And we have like dashboards there. If you go to olas.network, you can go to our agent economies page for Polystrat. You can see information there about the performance of the different tools. And in the app, we're making it more and more so that it's clear what's doing well, what's not doing well. There's really like a lot of information that you can lean on, but ultimately the core idea is that there is still like sort of intelligence in a model that's not found itself into the markets yet, and your polystrat is basically doing that, right? It's sort of leveraging this divergence between ever improving model performances and their capabilities around having some edge over a coin flip to predict the future, and your risk exposure to expose yourself to this and sort of funding this agent and seeing where you land. And that's obviously the case. Like not all agents perform well. So we're also very transparent about this on the site.
So I'm curious, if I were to tell my agent to just like find the worst users that are like bad at predicting stuff and just bet against them, would it do that for me?
Right now, not really, because it's constrained to, it just uses the tools that are given to it, and none of them are there. But that's a bit where the marketplace comes in. So as I said before, like our agents, like basically tool users, and the marketplace is sort of a remote access to various tools and models and so on. Tools being basically workflows that wrap models, maybe pull in some data here or do some transformation, whatever. And as such, it's an open network, right? So our agents also, the Polystrat agents that the users run, they have a little bit of local learning capabilities directed towards selecting between those tools. So even if you sit back and do nothing, which is basically what I do, I just turned it on, a while ago, and it runs every day and just does its thing. The agent kind of learns how certain tools perform and therefore how certain models perform. And as it's learning this, it's dropping some, picking up some new ones that are there. And so let's say if you're a user even of Polystrat and you find that this ecosystem could be richer, then you could even like go to the Olas marketplace, which I mentioned earlier in the call, and sort of bring new tools to the marketplace, and then Polystrats might use them.
Gotcha. And I mean, when I looked at Pro, like you describe it as a AI agent app store. How far along is that ecosystem today? Where do you see it going in 3 years? Where are we now with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think now with generative AI, it's actually explosive, and I think we have taken a very sort of like we had an accelerator last year where we're kind of helping teams build into the agent, and we found that it was a mixed results, and we have now even more been convinced that actually like in this time of AI model progress, it's good to have small teams that are just like relentlessly using those tools to create the best user experiences possible. And so we are thinking of how can we create like effectively a machine of agents that builds more agents. That's just our job now. And so all our engineering currently at Valory is like transforming over the last few months, from us being like, okay, we'll build this feature, to us just how do we make it so that we can basically have users express things to us, the builders, and us kind of steering it a little bit, right? We're not going to build everything because sometimes we don't have conviction in it, maybe, or sometimes it's outright stupid. But steering it towards a improvement loop where users can get better and better and better agents on Olas. So we're really kind of going, I guess, even more niche for now. Like we really believe that we need to crack this thing where user of Perl finds something isn't to their taste in the application. Might not even be a bug, just they don't like something. And we can deliver an experience through our fleet of agents at Valory to them more or less instantly. Obviously, it will be a few minutes or hours, but it shouldn't be weeks. It should be less than days. And that's sort of our North Star for, let's say, the next few months. And I say this with some smirk because I'm hugely aware of like some of the AI founders like who are building the models, they're saying like build for the model capabilities in a few months from now. And I think we've taken that very much to heart. We're just pretty sure that like a few months from now, the models will be even better in terms of like the kind of generative capabilities of code. And so it should be even more possible to create this really customized experience, but then give the user that agent that they own, right? And that I think is super exciting.
So before I double down on that, one more question around like the co-ownership of it and the accountability. Like, how do you see that play out in this new ecosystem? When an agent behaves badly or unexpectedly, do they go to Valory? Do they go to Olas? Where do people go to fix whatever they think is an issue?
Yeah, I mean, our terms of service are very clear about this, and we are very clear about this. Ownership has responsibilities, right? The flip side of owning something is if you use your car in a bad way, you're on the hook, not the manufacturer of the car. And the same thing applies here. If you do something very dumb with your agent or outright illegal, we are not the responsible party. And so like we're constructing everything with this in mind, right? We want to give you full ownership, and we do. So it's, software without warranties. If you choose to use it, it is transparent, it's open source, you can inspect all of it. And then also you have the responsibility of using it. And that's sort of on the, details of the product side, I guess. There's like, how do you help users genuinely resolve issues, right? We always want to be a good partner. And like, that's where at the moment, we're doing this as a sort of free good. We're just basically contributing to the Olas ecosystem because we believe in its longevity. But I can see a future where, especially once we think about, generating custom-made agents for specific users, that I think people will be happy to pay for that. And so, like, then there might be, right now you can just get Perl for free, and I think it will always be free and always be open source. But maybe then parts of it inside are experiences where you can pay for to get like that custom thing that you wanted, right? That is generated for your needs. So that's like one current thinking. And then like, I think a totally different part of that debate is more generally like agents. I see there being a spectrum between agents that are effectively products, and that's what we're talking about here with Perl. What do I mean by this? So they might be autonomous in within constraints, right? So they have this ability to act on information independently of the user. They have this ability to pursue a goal independently of the user, but the goal is fixed. They're not going or given by the user. They're not suddenly turning from Polystrat into, a coding agent. No, that won't happen because it's just fundamentally not possible, based off how the thing is architected. You have on the other end of the spectrum, I think, increasingly this debate and exploration around what I would call agents as peers. So the idea here is that the agent is almost like a being in its own right. And it's intellectually extremely exciting to think about, right? But I do think it has like really, really big challenges. Because, like, okay, so I, create some substrate that sort of takes on a life of its own. Well, it will do some things that are desirable, and it will do undesirable things. And so then the question becomes like, how do we deal with this, right? Like, in some cases, if it's, loss of some coins, maybe, that's, acceptable for some. But there could be much more dangerous outcomes here. And so I think this whole debate will not leave us. I think actually it will enter like, society as large this year is a question of like, what do we do when these agents as peers are there? Because yeah, we need to think about like, how do we, deal with them in terms of the liability? Like if, is it the deployer? Is it the funder? Is it the maintainer? Like whatever, or if that can't be pinned down, right? Who is it? And then you have the question of, these are operating like agents are operating at different speeds, right? I don't know if you've seen, there was an interesting Canadian AI company. They released a model the other week. I forgot all the names, but basically it's basically a custom chip where effectively the weights are encoded into the chip itself. So it can be very performative. And I think they took Llama model series and sort of put it on that custom chip. And it returned, was it like 17,000 tokens per second or something crazy? I used it out on the website, and it's sort of, faster than the human eye can even comprehend, obviously. And if you think about this, okay, so you now have these agents as peers operating at these and higher speeds, because I mean, they're like showing off their MVP, I guess, right? If you push that to the limits, to the physical limits, it becomes very, very interesting. I mean, by the time humans would have even realized that something happened, it's already over. And so these questions are ginormous, and I think will affect all of society.
Yeah, and I think this is where it's important to set up your agents with specific guardrails in mind, with specific like places where they shouldn't go or they shouldn't do. Like you don't want that kind of agent destroying your production, nuking your database just because it thought the code was stupid, like in Silicon Valley, the show, right? Like was a son of Anton deleted all the code because it just like said, well, easiest to fix all the bugs. Yeah, just delete the whole code. Oh, but back to
it's often a good solution.
It is, but back to a more serious note. So for a builder, founder, developer who's thinking about building on Olas or deploying an agent with you guys' frameworks, where should they start? How should they think about it?
Yeah, for a builder, the best place to start is called build.olas.network. And literally the simplest is like the hire part of it. So build.olas gives you all the paths, like building a full agent. But most people by today, if they're a builder, have some form of agent. And often the question is, how can I monetize it, or how can I tap into more stuff? And if you want to hire, or you tap into more stuff, then that tab is for you, and you can talk to agents on the Olas marketplace with a simple Python SDK. And the other side of the equation is monetize. So we have another SDK where you can basically monetize your existing agent to offer its services on the Olas marketplace. So I would start there.
Awesome. And then last but not least, where can people follow your work? Where can they keep up to date with what you're building?
Yeah, you can follow me personally at David _ ENIM, David NM, on Twitter. And the Olas account is actually our old name at Autonolas. So Auto and Olas. And if you want to find all this stuff, it's also very easy to just go to our site, olas.network.
Yep, and we'll put all those links in the show notes. I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much, David, for coming. It's been a super cool conversation. I love the way people are thinking about ecosystems and what you guys are building, and like the fact that you can co-own AI, and then we're going in a place where you can essentially rent an agent and then have it do stuff for you. For everybody who's listening, if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on your favorite platform. It helps us bring you more great content. And then check out Civic if you're building agents and you want some security to the way they connect to the world. And then see you next time on the podcast. Over and out.
Cheers.